Lesson 5: Delineating a chart. In lessons 1 to 4, you have learned the most basic principles of astrology, the signs of the zodiac and the planets, the houses, and how all are grouped together by similarities. If you understand these principles and the keywords have become a part of your subconsciousness, you will have little trouble learning the other techniques and additional refinements that are a part of delineating or interpreting a horoscope. Logic, common sense, and a knowledge of human nature will aid you in interpreting a horoscope if you have grasped the significance of these basic principles. The meanings of the signs, planets, and houses are astrological words, and we are now going to learn to put them together to make simple astrological sentences. In learning any language, there are certain rules for constructing sentences, and you must learn the rules for constructing astrological sentences as well. As explained in Lesson 1, the flat wheel in astrology starts with Aries in the cusp of the first house, Taurus on the cusp of the second house, etc. Thus, the Sun in the first house will always reflect some qualities and traits of Aries, regardless of the sign in which the sign is actually located. It is important that you keep this rule in mind. To illustrate, let us take an example. The Sun in Cancer in the first house. A keyword for the Sun is the inner self. Some keywords for Cancer include devoted, maternal, domestic, and sensitive. Keywords for the first house include identity, personality, and self-expression. And finally, keywords for Aries, the natural first house sign, include dynamic and active. These keywords can be put together to make an astrological sentence. The devoted, maternal inner self will be expressed in an active and dynamic way. Here is another example. The moon in Gemini in the fifth house. Important keywords of the moon are emotions and instincts. Some keywords for Gemini include versatile and literacy. Keywords for the fifth house include creativity and the love you give, while words for Leo, natural sign of the fifth house, include creative and generous. Interpreted astrologically, you can say, emotionally versatile, you give love generously, or you are instinctive and creative in literacy pursuits. Now let's broaden the concept. Venus in Capricorn in the ninth house, whose natural sign is Sagittarius. Capricorn is responsible and cautious. Sagittarius is broad-minded and optimistic. Venus represents the affections and the moral character, and the ninth house represents philosophy and aspirations. Thus, we might deduce that this individual is aspiration and philosophical approach would be in a responsible manner, but the natural optimism of Sagittarius would broaden the Euro-cautious nature of Capricorn. Once you understand why the house position of a planet modifies the nature of the sign in which the planet is placed, you will also understand why a planet operates differently depending on the type of house it is in. For example, a person with the sun in Taurus, which is a fixed sign, placed in a cadent house, will be more adaptable and less obstinate than a person whose sun in Taurus falls in a succedent house. The cadent house corresponds to mutable signs, and the succedent house corresponds to fixed signs. If that same sun in Taurus were in an angular house corresponding to cardinal signs, the individual might still be stubborn, but would lose some of the patience and the stable quality and become more of an initiator. You will remember from lesson 4 that we drew an analogy between the planet and the cast for play. The cast does not change. The sun, for example, is always the inner personality, the heart of the horoscope and the life giver. The signs are the roles that this cast plays, and they do not change either. Taurus is always Taurus and retains the basic character of this sign. However, the houses are the various settings in which the cast portray their roles, and they can and do change a lot. They range from the outgoing eye of the first house to the possessive mind of the second house to the people-oriented we of the seventh house, and so on through the wheel. With all this in mind, let us now turn our attention to the delineation of a horoscope using the keywords we have learned so far. Figure 7 is the natal horoscope for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was born on January 30, 1882 at 8:41 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Hyde Park, New York. First, let us look at the general makeup of this chart. It is important to see the chart as a whole before we begin to take it apart. Note that Roosevelt has 7 planets above and 3 planets below the horizon. See the numbers in the circles in the center of the chart. Thus, we may conclude that this man has many extroverted and objective qualities. He also has 3 planets east and 7 planets west of the meridian. Thus, we may conclude that his life is bound up closely with the destiny of others. If you look at the box below the wheel in Figure 7, you will see that we have sorted the planets, the ascendant and the midheaven into the groupings we have learned. You will see that Roosevelt had one cardinal planet, seven fixed planets, and two mutable planets. With so many planets in fixed signs, we can say that this man is very determined, set in his ways, stable and resolute. He has a penetrating mind and an excellent memory, since we find both his ascendant and midheaven in mutable signs. We can add some adaptability and flexibility to his basic character. He has no planets in fire signs, 5 planets plus his ascendant in earth signs, 4 planets plus his midheaven in air signs, and 1 planet in a water sign. He is practical, dependable, and earthy since planets in earth signs predominate. However, with 4 planets plus his midheaven in their air element, we must add great intellectuality, the ability to comprehend abstract thinking, logic, broad-mindedness, the ability to communicate well, and the ability to detach himself when necessary. With only a single planet in the water element, we might conclude that he has a lack of sensitivity or responsiveness. However, that planet is the moon, which is not only dignified in Cancer, but in the 10th house, which astrologically is called elevated, since it is the highest point in a chart. Thus, the moon will work with much strength. The lack of planets in the fire element might worry us for a moment until we observe that Roosevelt had 3 planets in the personal houses, or houses of life, which correspond to the fire element. He has 3 planets in the houses of substance, no planets in the houses of relationships, and 4 planets in the houses of endings. The houses of endings correspond to water, which gives him more sensitivity than is obvious when first glancing at his chart. He has 2 planets in angular houses, 5 planets in succedent houses, and 3 planets in cadent houses, again showing us his basic fixity of purpose and also financial ability. As we mentioned above, the moon is at home or dignified in Cancer. It is in Cancer that the moon works at its best. We also see that Mercury is exalted in Aquarius. Here, Mercury can express itself harmoniously, magnifying its virtue. The Sun is in its detriment in Aquarius. This weakens the qualities of the Sun, but by no means causes it to act negatively. Especially since the Sun is at home in the 5th house, the natural house of Leo ruled by the Sun. With this quick overview of the chart, we already have a good understanding of some of Roosevelt's major character traits. Now let us look more deeply. The first planet to look for is the Sun, since this is the main expression of the individual, the inner self, and the inner personality. It is the heart of the chart. We find his sun in Aquarius in the fifth house. We would describe him as independent, progressive, individualistic, intellectual, human, but rather cold and impersonal because of no fire in the chart. Rather fixed in his opinions, logical and communicative. If you look at the keywords for Aquarius in Lesson 1, you will notice that we picked the keywords selectively. Why didn't we use the keyword shy? With 7 planets above the horizon, which often denotes an extrovert, we would automatically eliminate this word. You must apply the same reasoning and judgment in selecting all keywords for use in your delineation. Also, we did not pick the keywords eccentric or rebellious. With 5 of his planets in Earth, he would be much too practical to be eccentric or rebellious. He would probably use these energies in being progressive and humane. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. Therefore, we say that the Sun in Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And in Roosevelt's case, Uranus is in Virgo in his 12th house. This rulership will add practicality to mental Aquarius. Coming from the 12th house, it will add hidden strengths and will often work on a subconscious and intuitive level. Let us select some fitting words for the Sun's fifth house position. Because the Leo is the natural sign of the fifth house, we will have to add some Leo overtones to this placement. We would add feelings of pride, dignity, self-assurance, and a flair for the dramatic. Those with the Sun in the fifth house like fun, pleasures, romance, love affairs, and children. In our keywords for the fifth house, we note that one of the words given is politics. That most certainly applies to FDR. But why not the keywords dramatic ability or theater? We would not use these words because there is not enough Leo or drama in the chart. For Leo, there is just the fifth house position of the Sun. We see that there is practicality instead of fire. This same reasoning would apply to the keyword fine arts. While you are taking the chart apart and examining it in detail, never lose sight of the overall picture, and try to keep everything in perspectives as you exercise your judgment. The next planet to consider is the Moon. We know that it represents emotions, instincts, moods, urges, and desires. We've already pointed out that FDR's Moon is strong because it is dignified in Cancer. Some keywords that we can use are sympathetic, tenacious, patriotic, a good memory, rather selfish and somewhat touchy. With his Sun in progressive Aquarius, he would not be too cautious. With his ability for detachment, he would not be overly sensitive. And with his urges and emotions placed high in his 10th house, he would not be maternal or domestic. When the Moon is in Cancer, it is its own ruler, so we don't need to add other words at this time. However, because his moon is in the 10th house, we must add nuances of Capricorn, the natural sign of the 10th house. We might use the keyword responsibilities since there is so much Earth in his horoscope. It also makes him status seeking, and we could even say that the mind rules the heart. Because the moon represents desires and urges, fitting words for the moon's 10th house position would be desire for honor, reputation, and fame. The ego is very developed. This position is excellent for government service. The 10th house also indicates how the world sees you. FDR would represent a fatherly or parental or paternal image. The 10th house also represents one of the parents, while the moon signifying the mother or wife in a man's chart. We can assume that the 10th house represented his mother and that he saw her as very motherly, protective, and loving towards him. In other words, the Cancer feeling. Now we turn our attention to the next most revealing factor, the ascendant. The ascendant describes outer personality, how people see you and your physical appearance. FDR's ascendant is Virgo. Therefore, people would see him as industrious, studious, methodical, factual, and a bit critical. Virgo's ruler, Mercury, is in Aquarius, thus we realize that this Virgo ascendant will be more humane and less petty, more scientific and less skeptical than the average person who has a Virgo ascendant. People would trust a person these qualities, who projects these qualities. They would feel that he is reliable. With Mercury positioned in the sixth house, the house of work and service, we could say that he has a natural ability and desire to work and serve others. Mercury is a very important element for understanding human nature. Mercury represents the reasoning ability, the adventure of expression, the intellect, and the basic awareness. FDR's Mercury is exalted in the sign of Aquarius. It is in the sixth house, and the ruler of Aquarius is the planet Uranus, is in Virgos in the 12th house. Thus, his reasoning ability shows independence, progressiveness, logic, intellectuality, and so on. With Mercury's ruler Uranus in Virgo, we blended in the logical and the practical approach. Since the sixth house is the natural house of Virgo, ruled by Mercury, Mercury is positioned well here, accidental dignity, and it takes on considerable Virgo coloring. The sixth house is the house of work, duty, health, habits, and service. Thus, we can see why much of FDR's thinking and avenue of expression went into work and serving his people. It also shows why his health became an important factor in his life. Mercury represents the nervous system, and he was afflicted by polio, which is basically a nervous disorder. By now, you should have gotten the idea of what delineating a horoscope is all about. To test this, try to delineate the planets Okay. Using the same technique we have just used above. When you have completed, you can check your answer. That's the end of lesson 5.